Danielle Panabaker,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm excited to see you again, actually,
I
after
know.
what I feel like it's been 25 years.
I think it's hope. I think it's been closer to 20. That's kind of
Okay, okay. We don't want to age
because
ourselves.
well, I didn't start acting until then.
Was that one of your first movies?
Oh, absolutely. That was in
Yeah,
like 2000 and 2003, 2004.
something like that. I have no idea. I know it was a Lifetime movie the week that we shot together
Yes, and it was one
in
of the
in
first
like
in
in
Halifax.
Halifax. In Halifax.
Yes, it was definitely one of the first things I'd ever done.
Yeah. It was fun. I remembered you as just being this, wonderful, sweet young woman who was just kind of like enjoying the adventure. And cut to 20 years later, I turned to my wife and I told her that I was going to kind of like jump on board and really kind of follow this new passion of mine. I was talking about mental health, kind of not non-binary, but this month in particular, we're working towards, we're talking about men's mental health. And she brought your name up, and I got super excited because it meant that we could connect. And obviously, good people bring good people together. So thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here.
Um, So one of the first questions I like to ask is there's this generational gap when we talk about kind of mental health in general, not just with men. Um, but I was a child. I was born in 1984. I was raised in a household that was a loving household. But in no way was it like, you know, let's talk about our feelings kind of household. I'd come home, I'd get bullied at school, and she'd be like, my mom would or my dad would be like, well, what are you gonna do? I'd be like, well, they're like, you're gonna go back to school and you're gonna stand up straight and you're gonna tell them that that's not fair and you're gonna move on. And I was like, okay, and that's kind of what I learned was kind of like pull up your bootstraps and move on. What was your experience growing up, kind of generationally with like you and how do you approach that kind of topic?
You know, I think the research and like just the wealth of knowledge that we have now that we didn't have 20 years ago about how important it is to take care of our mental health and talk about our feelings has really changed dramatically. So I was always a kid with a lot of feelings. Like I've always been someone who's incredibly sensitive, which I think is part of the reason I ended up in the field I'm in. And I'm just a feelings person in general. And I think I've always had a lot of feelings, but it wasn't until probably my later teens and early 20s that I started to learn a language around mental health and self-care and things like that. And I'm now in a different chapter in my 30s as a mom, raising kids and trying to bring that language and bring that awareness to every part of our lives. And it's a different thing. It's a different thing than what I grew up with. I'm sure it's a different thing than what my parents grew up with, but it's definitely a choice that I make as a woman and a individual and a person to focus on my mental health, try to support others in their mental health, and also hopefully to encourage my children to focus on their mental health as well.
Absolutely. We got to say hi quickly before we jumped into this recording. You said you moved a lot.
Yeah, I moved every 2 years growing up, basically. My dad worked in sales, and so he was constantly being, promoted or moved to a different area and that sort of thing. And, I think that was challenging for me as a kid. I don't have, some people have like their parents still live in the childhood home that they grew up in, and that's not my
Hmm.
reality. And
Sure.
some people have best friends that they've had since childhood, and because we moved around so much, I don't really have that. And I think, when I was younger, it was tricky for me to adjust and make new friends. But I think it also made me resilient, and I think it also, shaped who I am. That in our line of work, you're constantly meeting new people, and I think I'm quick to try and introduce myself and make a new friend, uh, because I'm so used to it at this point.
Sure. So it's through the challenges of growing up that you've learned a lot of wonderful and useful tools that have made you a stronger adult. And
Absolutely.
I think it's always an important thing to remember that, like, it's through challenges and a lot of the time pain, and change, which is this one constant that we have in life. Nothing is ever going to stay the same. We are always going to age. We are always going to find another hurdle that we're going to have to get over. Change is a catalyst for growth.
Mhm.
And without growth, we kind of get stuck in our ways. And you know, we're lucky that we do. You touched on this information age that we live in, where we have the internet at our fingertips. We can Google any kind of self-help topic we might have. We can find forums that we can talk to people on. We could talk to people anonymously on the internet, and hopefully find safe spaces there where we can do so, to kind of share things that we might need, if that's an outlet that we need, as people.
But I do
Um,
think it can sometimes be hard to take that first step, and that's one of the things that I love about what you're doing right now, and it's just raising the awareness. I was looking at some material online and just, the numbers, it's surprising to me how many people see that they're having a hard time, but don't necessarily know how to look for help. And sometimes the first place you look for help is not actually going to be what fits for you. And I think, with women, not to be gender specific, but like, we tend to, or at least again, me and all my feelings. I want to talk about feelings. I don't want to really get into it. And I think there's a little bit more stigma attached to it for men about, you know, and again, I was looking at some of the studies. They don't want to seem weak. They don't want to reach out. And there's more stereotypes that make it harder to do that. But hopefully what you're doing is making a difference and making it easier for someone to like have that check in with themselves and say, "Oh, I'm having a tough time right now. Like I'm not feeling like myself in whatever way that manifests itself, and how can I do something about it?"
how important for you on a daily basis is it to exercise some kind of outlet? And whether or not it's expressing your feelings, and sharing and communicating, with your skills that we learn as we grow up, hopefully, and it's is still a skill that we can continue to build and work on as human beings,
Mm.
or yoga, or going out and being outside. How often do you kind of take a moment to, like, what was consciously or subconsciously, to like get out of your kind of box?
I mean, I think it's definitely something I've learned as I've gotten older that I need it. Um, I worked on The Flash and we filmed in Vancouver basically for the majority of almost 9 years. And we were rarely there in the summer. And
Wow.
Vancouver, as you're familiar with, can be kind of gray and dark. And
Yes.
it was hard to be away from friends and loved ones while I was up there. And one of the things that I learned, in my 20s while I was on that show was that, I needed to move my body, that was actually part of my self-care. And I
Hmm.
needed to move my body and like get those endorphins flowing to make a big difference for myself. And the number of times I remember like dragging myself like just onto a treadmill or to a workout class or something just
Yeah.
to get the blood flowing, get the blood pumping because it made such a difference for me, in my ability to move through the day and other things like self-regulate and, I think and so that was one chapter of my life and then here I am as a mom and I'm such a believer that it's much harder to take care of someone else if you haven't taken care of yourself first. And as you know, as an early new parent, especially in the early days, there's not a lot of time to take care of yourself. But finding little ways to do that in whatever it is. I mean, maybe it's just 2 minutes of silence while you take your cup of coffee, or maybe it's 5 minutes like with your partner, figuring out what that is that really helps take care of you
Hmm.
being clear and making it a priority, I think can make such a big difference.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody. He gave me this analogy of, the signs on the back of airplane seats.
Yeah, you gotta
They
put your
say,
mask on first before
so
you
you
can
can
take care of
take care of
someone
the
else.
people around you. I love that. It's just a
Such a good one.
simple analogy, but it's so true, and it comes up often. And you are so right. Um,
Especially
so
as a parent, because, like, if you're dysregulated, if I'm anxious or whatever, I'm not gonna be able to be the best version of my parent of the best version of myself for my kids. So
sure.
learning how to take care of yourself and take care of your mental health and all the self-care things. And then I think that helps me be a better parent, hopefully.
So if you have like so let's just say as an example. So if a parent who's working, 100 hours a week, who feels spread thin, and they only get to spend, an hour with their son or daughter every day, but they're coming home and they're stressed out. Um, they're working at such a pace where they're approaching those few minutes that they
Burnout,
do
yeah.
get, and they're burnt out. It's better to take 10 minutes and sit in your car and breathe than go into that house and bring in, and project this stress of your life. There needs to be some kind of balance. And
I'm not a parenting expert, but I do know that, my kids feel better, feel more connected when you can spend some quality one-on-one time with them and be totally present. And if you're still worried about your work stress or, your relationship stress, familial stress, whatever it is, it's hard to be present. And I think kids in particular are really sensitive to that.
of course, I was a sensitive kid. I remember asking my mom about therapy as a kid because it had been brought
Mm.
up by a friend who said, "Oh, I talked to somebody." I said, "Who do you talk to?" Goes, "Oh, I go see somebody after school." And said to my mom, I said, "Can I go? Can I go talk to a therapist?" And she went, "What's wrong with you?" And I
Mm.
went, "Oh, I mean, nothing." And it was it was shut down very quickly. And then in my mid-20s, it became very apparent to me that I needed to work through some things, and I didn't have outlets in my life. I had good friends, but we didn't talk about the deeper things.
Yeah.
And so I started exploring therapy, and I got my manager at the time introduced me to her therapist. Now I went to 2 sessions and it didn't work out for me. And then I ended up getting, we have health insurance. We're very privileged to have health insurance through our union. And it's still something that our union needs to figure out because personally, I think it's a bit of a mess. If you've paid into your dues, you should have access to health insurance, period. But that's a different topic. And then I called my health insurance and I said, like, I'd like a list of accessible people that are within my umbrella. And they sent me a bunch, and I went and saw 2 or 3, and I finally met somebody who was a cognitive behavioral therapist,
Mhm.
which is a therapist who's approaches the conversation from a little more of a practical standpoint. They kind of give you advice, they give you things to reflect on, an ability to kind of step out of the circumstances that you describe to them and go like, really? So you think that was a good thing to say? Things like that. And so I found a therapist, and it took me a while. It took me until I was about 30 to find a therapist that I fell in love with. And from that moment on, I really started to make some great changes in my life.
Well, I think you've touched on a lot of important points here. I mean, the first of which is like, acknowledging that like there was space for that in your life and you would love some support in that way. And again, like I think I'm hopeful that conversations like this do change the stigma around it and that it's okay to reach out for help. And I also think you bring up an excellent point that like not always is it the perfect fit the first time. You know what I mean? It's like you try something
mhm,
and like, with anything, like you try a smoothie and like, oh, that smoothie wasn't my favorite smoothie. So I'll make it a
right,
little different next time. And you
right.
got to figure out what works for you. Like I was saying with the exercise, like I know I have to move my body to take care of myself. And
Mhm.
it's good that you persevered. And like again, I'm I think mental health is so important, and I think it's great that our insurance helps with that. I think there's always room for improvement, uh,
Yes,
but happy to have that conversation with you as well. Uh,
sure.
but, and there are getting to be more and more resources. Like, I think it's great, you know, um, there are more online options. I think that, if we can find any silver linings in the pandemic, like, if a commute is a reason stopping you from getting the help that you need, like maybe you can find someone who can see you online and like you were able to find someone who is in network in your insurance. It took you a few
Mhm.
people, but
Sure.
we're able to do it. And then, just to have that outside, non-judgmental, non-biased sounding board, because I do think there is a lot of value. I mean, I know, at least for myself, I have to process things and it takes me time to process them. And a lot of times I do have to talk through it and I have to, try things on and say, well, and think about, well, what if? And, the process, talking to someone can really help you process it. And also someone having a different perspective that can help you, like I said, in a non-judgmental way, sort of look at your choices and say, are these serving you?
Of course, of course. So I gotta ask you another question here. So when Katie brought this up to you, you were like, yes, I think that's important. I'd love to have this conversation. And I can't thank you enough for that, because it goes to show what kind of person you are. And
Mm,
you're open. You said you were sensitive and you're an emotional person. I think that that comes with such value in society, because you are a reflection of not only yourself but the people around you. And
mm.
we need as much of that as we can get. And I know you have a family, you're married. Why is talking about mental health? Why do you think it's beneficial for the future of our children?
I mean, I think it's beneficial for everyone, and I think it's beneficial, like, for everyone as we exist, all people, like, yes, beneficial to our children as well, and hopefully it's again, like we were talking about earlier in our conversation, I think we're already changing the course by,
Hmm.
having you and I having a different conversation than maybe we had as children, and then being able to have a different conversation with our own children. So
Hmm.
I am such an advocate of mental health because I think it really influences every other part of yourself, your body, the way you move through the world, the way you can show up for others, your partners, your friends, your family at work, things like
Hmm.
that. And I think it is important to focus on. And I think, you know, it's okay to, I think it's important to stop and say, okay, I need help. Like, I'm struggling in whatever capacity that is, and, attend to me might not be attend to you, but it's still my journey, and if I need help, I think it's important to be able to stop and recognize that you need help and then ask for help and try and find the support. So it's not always a simple process, and that's why I think it is important to give more space and more attention to this so that we understand and we can be respectful when someone says, "Hey, I need help," and we can try and show up for them.
No doubt, no doubt. Thank you for that. We kind of have a responsibility to this next generation. I mean, maybe it's not fair for me to kind of um, generalize that, because it's certainly a pressure I feel as a new parent. Wanting, and I remember my mom saying this to me. And again, we are only as useful as the tools we have,
Mm.
right? And it took me a long time to be able to kind of grow up. Took me a long time to grow up, period. Um, but I did. And once I kind of got there, I was able to kind of look back at my parents and forgive them, I think, a little bit for some of the things that I didn't quite understand as a kid, because you kind of reach a point, and as a kid I put my parents on this pedestal,
Mm.
and I kind of looked up to them as like they always had the answers, and whatever they say went. And that's kind of like, I look back on that memory with such a cherished heart, because it's what we have as kids.
Mhm.
And then I remember getting into my teens and my mom saying, nobody wrote a book on this stuff. And now I think about it, and I'm like, well, now there's books about everything nowadays. And then I remember her saying to me at one point, I only ever wanted better for you than what I had as a
Mm.
kid. And God, did she succeed in giving me that.
Aw.
And so I feel this responsibility, this inherent responsibility to kind of do the same thing for my kids, to be just a little bit better than what I had. And so I'm trying to learn the tools to pave a safer road for, I have a daughter with Katie. And I want that road to be just a little bit smoother for her. And I hope that by the time she's dating, um, that there is a kind and sensitive young man, girl, whoever it may be, that comes to the door to take her out for her first date.
Mhm.
And I'm not looking at this kid going, "Oh, I remember what it was like when I was a kid. Oh my God." You know what I mean?
I mean, I think as a parent and I think hopefully as a person, we're all just trying to do the best we can. And to your point, like finding the tools, it can be hard, but we do the best we can with what we have. And, now there are books on this stuff, but
Yeah,
it can also be a little bit of like, well, what works for one family might not work for another family. So you
sure.
and Katie are going to know what's best for your family and for your daughter. And, it's, I, I mean, truly, I'm just doing the best I can. And I think we all are. I think that's,
Yeah,
especially as a parent, like one of my big lessons is everybody's doing the best they can. Just because they're not making the same choice you are, it's not a comment on you or your choice. Everybody's just
mm,
doing the best they can in their situation with the tools they have at hand.
yeah. I think that's an important thing to remember as we learn to identify with ourselves and understand who we are as people, because we are constantly growing and changing,
Mhm.
as are the people around us. And
Yeah.
I think as long as we're doing our best efforts to move in the direction that we believe is the right direction, then we are doing our best. So, thank you so much.
Of course. Like I said, I think it's so wonderful and important what you're doing, really opening this conversation about mental health specifically for men. And I hope I hope this video makes a difference for someone and that they do like take that moment to check in and be like, hey, how am I doing? Like, do I need support? And then
Yeah,
hopefully finding the support they need.
it's okay to ask for help. I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
need I need help all the time, all the time.
I do too. And
Jeez.
help, it looks like different things on different days.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you, and thank you for helping me have this conversation.
It's
I
been a
appreciate it.
pleasure.
It's nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you.
All right.